Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory be unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makar Kudash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace, salutations, and blessings be unto the hopeful elect, pushing his truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the globe, in the sincere hopes of being delivered in these last days. Alright, this is the brother Yakanan from the GMS England branch. As you see here, I have this interview with Victor Gao, and it's from this YouTube channel that goes by the name of The Cradle, and it's entitled "You Dare to Invade Iran. Be prepared for consequences." Alright. Now, Victor Gao, as you can see here in the description, is a Chinese lawyer, international relations expert, and vice president of the Center for China and Globalization. Now, I believe in the past, I've also done videos based off of, statements that he's made and information that he's brought out. And from time to time, he makes statements that can definitely, muster edification and give the opportunity to go into biblical prophecy, which, Lord willing, that's what I'm going to do in the course of this lesson. And it just goes to show that Babylon the Great, which is America, is being exposed in these last days, as pursuing to Jeremiah 49 and verse 10. And these nations are watching your every move, all right? They're watching how you're dealing with, particular nations like Venezuela, Iran, of course, Canada, Greenland, so on and so forth. And they're taking notes, all right? They're definitely taking notes. Nothing is going unnoticed concerning the madness that Babylon the Great, is expelling, in these last days through Trump, all right? Because he perfectly embodies, that pride, that arrogance, and that delusional, impulsive spirit that's going to lead to the downfall, to the demise, Babylon the Great, all right? Which is why we believe, Lord willing, he's going to be the last king of Babylon, all right, that we will experience in our lifetime. He's showing all the perfect signs, all right, perfect characteristics that's going to lead Babylon the Great, the empire into, decline, all right, and utter destruction. So without further delay, I'm going to play a few excerpts from this video, and then Lord willing, we'll get into, a few scriptures.
Right side of history or the wrong side of history. Now, on the other hand, allow me to make a point, which is a very profound point. I think when history looks back at this year, the year of 2026, because of what the United States has been doing since the beginning of this year, for example, launching this war of aggression against Iran, launching military actions against Venezuela, abducting, hijacking the president of Venezuela and the first lady, for example, and threatening Canada with taking over Canada, threatening Greenland, threatening to violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Denmark, threatening wars against so many other countries. The history in the future will look back as the year 20.
And again, this goes to show, I say again, that these nations are watching every move that Babylon the Great is making. All right, they're watching, the reckless, behavior. They're watching the arrogance and the dangerous, delusional, impulsive nature that, Donald Trump is showing, in these last days. Okay, and it's making the whole world question the validity, if you will, of the position of Babylon the Great as a leading world power. All right, we're showing you that their power and their influence is waning, upon the earth, man. Okay, people are starting to see through the lies, the deception, and the wicked techniques that Babylon the Great uses in order to maintain, power and maintain a stronghold, upon the earth. Okay, and it reminds me, I've got it loaded up here, of let's get the book of Jeremiah 50 and verse 23. All right, now it says, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? All right, now Babylon the Great, which is America, is likened unto the hammer of the whole earth. Okay, and he gave, the examples of how, they've been threatening, all of these nations. They're going to war with all of these nations. They went into Venezuela. They took Maduro and his wife. Okay, they still have them, in their clutches to this day. All right, threatening Canada, and Greenland. All right, they're threatening now to go into Cuba. All right, and take Cuba. These are the kind of words that they're using. These are the kind of threats that they're putting out there, showing you that they're the hammer of the whole earth. Okay, they rule, with brute force. They rule with blackmail. Okay, they rule with threats. All right, they're embodying, the spirit of gangsterism, and really just being niggers, upon the earth. They don't follow no rules. Okay, they're the true niggers, of the earth. I'm talking about Esau, Edom, beginning, with their wicked ruling elites that rule the earth in darkness. Okay, the Illuminati, all right, mentioned in Psalms, the 64th chapter. All right, the secret council of the wicked. That's how they're ruling. All right, and again, the nations are seeing how they're carrying on, and the nations are taking note, because ultimately this is going to end with Babylon the Great, which is America, being pelted with ICBM missiles. All right, the scriptures tell us that the nations are going to shoot all of their arrows, which the arrows represent missiles, ICBM missiles, at Babylon the Great, that whore, and burn her. All right, that's what's ultimately going to happen to Babylon the Great, and the Esau Edom's kingdom, is going to be totally annihilated. And again, Donald Trump is the man, that embodies all the right emotional instability, arrogance, pride, and delusional and impulsive nature that, Lord willing, is going to bring all of these prophecies to pass, man. All right. So again, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder? Now, how in other ways, how is America, Babylon the Great, dominating the world? They do it, through finance. They do it through, putting sanctions, upon nations. Okay, they got many different ways and techniques in which they bully the nations and hold nations hostage. Okay, and their time is coming to an end again, because the nations are seeing, what they're doing. Okay, now let's go back to this video. Let me go back a little bit.
Integrity of Denmark, threatening wars against so many other countries. The history in the future will look back at the year 2026 and mark it as the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. No matter how you...
Right, so he says we're going to look back and we're going to note this as being the end of the beginning of the Pax Americana. All right, so I Googled that term that he used, which I've heard it before. Now it says here, let's get it here loaded up. Pax Americana, which goes back to the Latin, and it basically means American peace. So he's saying that this is the beginning of the end of American peace. Now let's see the definition of that. It says Pax Americana, meaning American peace, refers to the period of relative international stability and global influence, led by the United States following World War II in 1945. Okay, it is characterized by US-led alliances like NATO, economic, military, and diplomatic dominance. All right, and again, that dominance and that influence, is waning, on the earth concerning Babylon the Great, concerning America. And nations are not feeling as secure, as comfortable being affiliated with Babylon the Great as they once did. All right, which shows you that, that they're going down, their influence is going down. The fear and the grip that they once had on the nations is wavering. Okay? It says, fostering a largely Western-aligned global order. Now it says key aspects. It says definition and time frame. It generally covers the era from 1945 to the present, focusing on peace maintained through American power and economic influence. Okay? Again, they're the hammer on the whole earth. Okay? And they've maintained that power and that influence through fear, through bullying, okay, through war, going into nations and, creating, the perfect environment, for coups, and then instating puppet leaders. This is what they've been doing, okay? This is their speciality. It says this order was built on American military strength, deployed globally, economic dominance with the dollar as a key currency, all right? Which was the world, reserve currency, the American dollar, okay? And, you have the BRICS nations, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, okay? And that poses a great threat to the dollar, all right? Because that's backed by what? Gold. All right, that's a whole new movement, upon the earth that them nations have formed, which goes against American dominance, which goes against, the American stronghold, upon the earth, which again, that's a defiance against America, against the ruling power, showing you again that they're going down as a nation, okay? Now it says here, it brought relative peace to the Western Hemisphere, and during the Cold War provided security for many allied countries. Critiques and nuances. It is not a perfect peace. It included numerous, smaller conflicts and proxy wars involving the US. Some scholars suggest it is more of a non-imperial empire with significant power, though not absolute, as the Roman era, says the YouTube video. All right, now there was a bit, let me see where it is. It says declining influence. It says the three pillars of military, economic, and normative power have seen erosion over time. Yeah, because they're going down. It says the rise of nations like China, which do not always align with Western liberalism, has challenged US hegemony. All right, Russia too. It says shifts in US policy, including reduced foreign aid and increased tariffs, have led to debates about whether Pax Americana is ending or experiencing significant disruption. And I believe this Pax Americana, even going back to 2014, 2013, there was articles going into Pax Americana and how, America as, a main influence and dominant force upon the earth is coming to an end. All right, which really, the downfall of America began really with the emergence of Albert Bivens, 1969, 1970. All right, when this truth coming about. Okay, as the scriptures say, after 3 days and a half they shall rise upon their feet. All right, this truth coming out, this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. That's what's ultimately bringing down Esau Edom's kingdom. All right, is this truth. Us going out there on the highways and the byways and exposing this devil and exposing the truth about, what's really happening upon the earth. Okay, but they would have you believe otherwise, man. But this is really what's bringing down this kingdom, is this truth. It says, some analysts argue that the American peace was less about U.S. intervention and more about other nations. There was another part I wanted to get. Let me see if I can find it. Right, so, all right, here it is. So, why did Pax? That's not the one I wanted. I wanted the yeah. What ended Pax Americana? All right, now check this out. It says American political analyst, and this is from Wikipedia. Ian Bremmer argued that with the election of Donald Trump and the subsequent rise in populism in the West, as well as U.S. withdrawal from international agreements such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, NAFTA, and the Paris Climate Accords, that Pax Americana is over. All right, so Donald Trump, right, he's a significant part of why Pax Americana is being questioned. All right, why dominance of America, Babylon the Great, and their power and influence over the nations is being questioned because of Donald Trump. Again, showing you that he's a key ingredient, to the downfall of Babylon the Great. And that's why, again, we believe through the Spirit that this dude may well be, the last king of Babylon that we experience in this time, man. Because it makes perfect sense. He's creating the perfect environment for Babylon the Great, to go out as pursuing, to prophecy. Okay? So it's beautiful. So that is, the definition of Pax Americana as he was going into. All right? Showing you that, Babylon the Great is going down. All right? Its influence, on the nations is going down. And these nations are looking down, on Babylon the Great. Narrowly look upon thee, so on and so forth. All right. So we're seeing that, happening in real time. Okay. Now let's go back to the video and see what else we can get from here.
We'll look back at the year 2026 of Denmark threatening wars against so many other countries. The history in the future. We'll look back at the year 2026 and mark it as the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. No matter how you define Pax Americana is coming to an end. And this year is the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. Whatever President Trump and his government are doing right now only have one result or one impact. That is to further accelerate the demise of Pax Americana.
And you can't deny that. Every decision and every move, that Trump makes and his cabinet is falling, upon them, all right? Is not benefiting them in any way, shape, or form. Okay? They're contradicting themselves. All right, they've miscalculated, this war, concerning Iran and Israel, and how easy it was going to be. Okay, so they clearly, have engaged in something that they didn't know the severity of what they were getting themselves into, man. Okay, now from there, let's get right quick. I believe it's Isaiah 19. All right, let's get Isaiah 19. And around the 14th verse. Yeah. So this is Isaiah chapter 19 and verse 14. And it reads, "The Lord have mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit." All right. And we're witnessing Egypt, all right, the new Egypt, which is America, Babylon the Great, in every work. All right, everything they do, is going against them. Every decision they make is not benefiting them. Okay, it turns out to be a contradiction. It turns out to be miscalculated. Okay, they underestimated, Iran. They underestimated how prepped they was for this war. Okay, to the point where they've actually, tried to negotiate ceasefires, and Iran has threw it back in their face, and they don't even want to do a ceasefire. They actually want them, to go on the ground. Okay, showing you that they're not feared by the nations no more, man. They've lost that influence, they've lost that power, so they're gonna have to go all out, okay, to try and mimic or embody that strength again, which is gonna cause what the heights of World War III, okay, which is gonna cause the prophecy to be activated, and all of these nations to shoot their missiles, their arrows upon Babylon the Great. That's what it's all leading to. Okay? That is what it's all leading to, man. Because when a bully loses power and loses the fear, of a person, then they're gonna have to go all out to try and regain, that fear back, but it's not gonna work. It's too late. Okay? So again, this is an NLT. It says the Lord has sent a spirit of foolishness on them. So all their suggestions are wrong. They cause Egypt to stagger like a drunk in his vomit. All right. So the Lord has put a spirit of foolishness on them. So all their suggestions are wrong. And we're seeing that in the news every single day. We're seeing that in these reports, that spirit of foolishness that's upon them, man. Okay. Now check this out. This is from the MSN.com, and it says Pentagon seeks 200 billion for Iran war. Okay. But I thought that the war was already won. Okay, if the war was already won and it was, it's a few weeks from being over, this was a few weeks ago, this was said, then why the hell would you be requesting 200 billion in order to add, to the expenses of this war? Showing you that they've made a grave mistake. Showing you that they miscalculated what they were actually doing concerning, going against Iran. Okay, so this is a huge blunder, a huge mistake for Babylon the Great, which is going to end in them being totally annihilated, totally destroyed in these last days, man. Okay? And then you had Trump belittling Keir Starmer because, he was apprehensive, in, giving help, to Babylon. And I believe it's also the Spanish leader as well. He was belittling the Spanish leader and saying he was going to cut off all trade with Spain, so on and so forth, because they said they didn't want to, contribute, to this war. So, he's going against his allies. Okay? And then, first you want their help, and then, a few days later you're saying, America doesn't need anyone. America's the greatest and the strongest nation on earth, and, we could do everything on ourselves. Showing you they're double-minded. Showing you they're weak. All right? They're showing major signs of weakness in these last days. Showing you that, their confidence is really, hitting an all-time low. All right? Now let's go back to this video.
One result or one impact, that is to further accelerate the demise of Pax Americana. Therefore, philosophically speaking, we need to be very much convinced about this almost inevitable turn in history, the course of history which is being played out, and we do not need to rush it. It will come to an end under its own weight. And what President...
And what he said there, it will come to an end under its own weight. All right? And remember, Esau, Edom's kingdom, is a divided kingdom. All right? So ultimately, the Lord is having them bring themselves down. But it also reminds me of... where is it? I believe it's in Job. Is it Job 18? Yep, this is Job chapter 18 and verse 7. Now remember what he said. Let me just go and play it again.
Which is being played out, and we do not need to rush it. It will come to an end under its own weight.
He said basically America, Babylon the Great, will come to an end under its own weight. Now this is Job chapter 18 and verse 7. The steps of his strength shall be straightened, and his own counsel shall cast him down. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walketh upon a snare. All right, so Yahweh Shem Yahushai is causing, their own devices, all right, their own ways of being to work against them. All right, also in the book of Job, it says, he disappointeth the devices of the crafty. All right, so their way of being, their bullying nature and the way they ruled the nations in wrath, all right, is actually coming against them. Okay, putting sanctions on nations. All right, you got nations out there that have been under sanctions for years upon years. Okay, straight up bullying, straight up gangsterism that they've been ruling through. Okay, now in the NLT it says the confident stride of the wicked will be shortened. Their own schemes will be their downfall. All right, so the Lord is taking away the confidence of Babylon the Great. Okay, and it says their own schemes will be their downfall. All right, so their own wicked schemes will be their downfall. All right, and remember, they're trying to chip the people. They're trying to chip everyone, upon the planet. Ultimately, that's their agenda, but that's going to fall against them. Now, the Lord is going to allow them to, do that, to a certain extent. People will be chipped. People will succumb to being impaled with that MOTB. But as the scriptures tell us, also in the book of Job, when he is about to fill his belly, Yahweh Shem Yahushai is going to take him down. All right? And it says the wicked walk into a net, they fall into a pit. All right? So that's what's prepared. All right? Yahweh Shem Yahushai has prepared a pit for the wicked. And that pit is waiting for them to be, consumed by. Okay? Let's go back to the video.
You do not need to rush it. Almost inevitable turn in history, the course of history is being played out, and we do not need to rush it. It will come to an end under its own weight. And what President Trump and his government are doing are accelerating the final curtain fall for Pax Americana.
Right, so he said Donald Trump is accelerating the final fall, for Pax Americana, all right, which is true, because even when you look at the, ancient Rome, it fell the same way, pride, arrogancy, these are all things that were present, aforetime, leading to the downfall of the ancient Roman Empire, all right, which ancient Rome is Babylon reincarnated in these latter days. All right, now let's get right quick the book of Proverbs, chapter 16 verse 18, and it reads, pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. All right, so pride goeth before destruction, man. All right, Esau, Edom, beginning with their ruling elites, they're about to be destroyed, through their pride. All right, they're about to be taken down through their extreme arrogancy that they've been ruling with upon the earth. They've come to the point where they're delusional, all right, and they're making impulsive, erratic movements, all right, through, Donald Trump, which is exposing them and exposing, their weakness in these last days, all right. So they're about to be destroyed. It's clear as day, and if you can't see it, then Yahweh Shem Yahushai is simply, not dealing with you. Okay? Now, let's get, I wanted to get, let's get the book of Obadiah, all right? I wanted to get Obadiah because ultimately their pride, has deceived them in these last days, all right? Now we'll start from verse 2. This is Obadiah, verse 2. And it reads, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. All right. And in the NLT, it says, the Lord says to Edom, I will cut you down to size among the nations. Babylon the Great, America, is being cut to size among the nations. All right. They're narrowly looking upon Babylon the Great, smaller nations are becoming more bold against Babylon the Great, which shows you what? They no longer have the same fear level that they had aforetime. I will cut you down to size among the nations. You will be greatly despised. The pride of thine heart have deceived thee. And that's very clear that, they've been deceived by their pride. Okay, again, talking down, to their allies, saying that they no longer, need help from anyone. They're the greatest nation upon the earth and they're never going to be thrown down. That's being deceived, via your pride. All right, you in your mind, as the scriptures say, the inner thought is that their houses shall continue forever. Well, no, you're going down. All right, you're going down through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, and the next nation to rule is going to be the nation of the Israelites, man. All right, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Yahushai. Okay, and it says, "Thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high." All right, that saith in his heart, "Who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord." All right, so you're about to be brought down. All right, and they exalt themselves as the eagle. And what's the animal, that they embody, that they exalt, upon the earth is the eagle, and they use that. All right, they use that in their imagery, in their I don't know, the word I want to use is not logos. Well, yeah, it's kind of a logo, that they use, the eagle, they use to represent themselves. And that even goes back to, the former, Edomite kingdoms as well, showing you that it's the same kingdom reincarnated in these last days. Okay. So they exalt themselves as the eagle, right? It's known for being a very prideful, bird. As it tells us in the book of Daniel, his look was more stout than his fellows. They embody perfectly pride. Okay. And again, Donald Trump, he's the perfect, candidate that embodies all of those negative traits, of the people that will be ruling in these last days, known as the Edomites, beginning with the elites on down. All right. So I'm gonna cut it off there. Lord willing, this brief lesson was edifying. And until next time, I'll say shalom.